So right now what you'll see is sort of an evolution of Greg's work over the last couple of years, what he's been dealing with aesthetically. And Greg, do you want to say a few words as we're looking through these images?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would like to thank everyone in attendance for coming. It's really wonderful to be able to do this virtually. And so I wanted to thank everyone who is participating. And I want to thank you, Tonya, and Michael, and Darcy, and Jeffrey, because I didn't think that I would be able to pull this together. And it was much more work for you. But I didn't know how I could pull this together on 3 days or 4 days notice. And here we are. So this is really great. And if we go back to the prints, I think that that's a good introduction, the way we kind of reviewed it yesterday when we were looking at those images. Mm-hmm. The intaglio prints that I did that were essentially burnished aquatints that look something like a mezzotint were a project that I began at Wake Forest when I was working there just as a visiting artist for a year in 2013. The proof is dated 2014 because I hadn't completed really any of the editions before that point. But the peony blossom was a subject that I wanted to work with simply because I took several pictures of a photo, several pictures of a peony from my parents' garden long before that, probably in 2009. And finally, I decided, okay, it's time. I want to do something with this, as taboo a subject for me as flowers were. I didn't see myself as such a specific or literal botanical artist. So these prints were the beginning of what became a very long and invested path in working with peony blossoms and combining them and manipulating them through Photoshop to arrive at the compositions that you'll see in subsequent slides.
And Greg, can you, Michael, if you can advance the slides to maybe some of the paintings from 2019? Yeah, like maybe stop there actually on that drawing.
Yeah, so I had mentioned this to you yesterday, that the CMBR studies were a reference to the cosmic microwave background radiation. And the way that I was able to permit myself to work with flowers and things, so literally from the garden, was to try to bridge that with an interest, a very passive armchair interest that I have in astrophysics, cosmology, and theoretical physics. And so I was listening to lectures online while I was painting and wanted to find a way to just touch upon the ideas, not represent them so much, but use them as a point of departure for what have ultimately become more aesthetic and visual explorations. But the cosmic microwave background radiation, essentially, I've pulled this from the wall the other day, so I'll pull this from the wall again. I'll hold this up. This is a map of the universe, and it's essentially a temperature map, because this is the electromagnetic radiation that exists in the universe that we can trace all the way back to the Big Bang. So this is basically a remnant of the beginnings of the universe as we understand it today. And this remnant, I'll hold this up here again, these are 3 different versions of it. This map essentially shows very, very minute thermal fluctuations in the space surrounding stars, so that we know that the empty space that we think of as entirely black is not actually entirely black, but is radiating very, very anemic, should we say, aspects of light. And that energy we can attribute to the lacking mass and the basically the mass of the universe, the weight of the universe. I wanted to kind of make a visual reference to this by creating holes and elements that were not painted in, so that what you have is more of a lattice than a completed series of peony blossoms, and thought that it would be interesting to use that as a reference to the cosmic microwave background.
In your interest in science, I know that one thing that's fascinated me in your work from the beginning of looking at your work so many years ago is that there's a strong element of nature and the natural world that
Mm.
plays into your work, but at this and the movement and growth that comes from the natural world, a really biological sort of expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I know that physics and science have really informed you intellectually in creating your work. So can you talk a little bit about why that blend of science and aesthetics from the natural world come into a marriage in your artwork?
Uh, it's a tricky question. I think that in our lives, throughout our lives, we're all searching for answers, and we're looking to solve problems and try to understand the world on a deeper level. And my work, without wanting to sound too trite, I want my work to carry some spiritual aspect to it, because this is where I find something is most touching for me. I guess to be able to explore the uncertainties of the world and to, apart from looking at evidence-based research and science, to be able to explore what moves us visually, what seems poetic to us, on a very basic level, is a way that I can relate to the world. And using nature to do that has always been the most compelling way for me to explore images.
You can begin to see the movement and the expansion and contraction that you were talking about in works like this one. And it's interesting to me that one thing we've been talking about in these conversations is the fact that the artist puts their voice out there. So everything that you're thinking of with science, physics, movement, expansion, contraction of the universe, all of those things inform your artwork, and you put your voice and your half of the communication out there. And then when I take it in, as a viewer, the imagery is identifiable for me, the petals, and yet so I spend time with it because it's something that is familiar to me. It's a part of an image that's familiar to me. And then my eye goes into the incredible amount of movement that is happening in a painting like this one. And the part that's even more amazing as a viewer that I would like to discuss is the fact that the longer I look at this painting, for instance, and the ones that we'll be seeing after, the more colors begin to emerge. As my eye spends more time, I begin to see reds emerge from the darks and lights. First, they appear as a really subtle pink. Sometimes they appear as a hint of a blue. And I don't really know if they're there because you intended it to be that color, or if my eye, because I'm drawn to look at the painting for so long, is actually creating that color or is imagining it. And it's an incredible experience for me and for art viewers, I would think, universally, because that's really the purpose of art, is to draw someone in to the point that they feel they are filling in some blanks and they're actually part of the conversation. For your work really does that for me so strongly.
I think it's a combination of both. I think that there is something that you are bringing to it, and that your eyes, in looking over the painting and spending time with it through that duration, you start to read colors into it. But I do uh, genuinely put colors into the painting as well. I don't want any of the grays to be completely gray, and I know that the paintings are overwhelmingly black and white, or shades of gray, but I want that to have more dimensionality to it. And so I do try to shift the color from warm to cool, that gray tone from a more blue gray to uh, possibly a cooler violet or even a greenish gray, and then to come back and bring rose colors and salmon colors and blush colors out to try to give a quality of vitality to the image. I find it's much more intriguing and compelling when the work can hold itself on the level of close proximity, and that it's not just the gestalt of what's happening, that initial impact of seeing the work and then being able to walk away from it. But I want you to be able to spend time with it and to live with it and to see it continue to unfold and develop. So that touches upon that touches upon this idea of duration that we had talked about, and the aspect of duration. Should we go into that?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Go ahead and start with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go rewind all the way back to New Mexico to graduate school. Because it was in New Mexico, when just in trying to digest that environment and the sense of space and scale there that was so different from what I had experienced in the Midwest, because of the openness and because of the expansive skies and your ability to see farther in any direction generally than you probably can, where I had lived to that point. And that sense of space was something that I had wanted to express as duration, because I've always, in listening to music, wanted to try to communicate an experience that had some semblance of duration or a component of duration embedded within it. And so this was a way for me to think about establishing a temporality to an image, in that you move through a space and that you traverse a space from one point to another, from A to B, and that trajectory from A to B, whether it's indicated by a line or two visual components that are drawing you from one to another, gives you this quality of movement and of duration, consequently. And so it's a very fundamental thing. And it's interesting to try to make that correlation between music and visual work. It's just it's something that I've always looked to do.
And for those of you who might be interested in learning more about this thing we were talking about yesterday, Jeffrey, do you want to go into the overtone conversation that we were having yesterday?
So, kind of wrapping in this idea of the influence of music in Greg's work and the science, and how arts and sciences merge and become this really fascinating world of intersectionality. When Tonya was talking about how she was perceiving the colors, and we were kind of going into depth with Greg about how he was creating that, and was it something that we were perceiving that was actually there, or something that was just that our minds were concocting? And I said, I have a lot of friends that I've learned a lot about music from. My best friend, Gerard Morris, is a phenomenal educator, and he's up in the Pacific Northwest, and I learned most of what I know about this from him. But it reminded me of, in music, what they call the overtone series, where you can play a pitch, and when you play that pitch, it will oftentimes ring pitches that you didn't play that are above that pitch. And you can audibly hear it. It's something you can, detect, and it's something that we can record and all of those things. So I just found that really fascinating, especially since Greg was, obviously very influenced by music. So if you guys would like, my friend Gerard actually made a very short video that describes how that actually works, and he demonstrated that. So if anybody is interested in us sharing that little clip that he made specifically for this, and he said he was so sorry he couldn't join us today. That would have been a lot of fun and even more dynamic. But just let us know, and we can email that or text it to you.
That was great. That was really wonderful that he was able to do that. I really enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear it in person, because I think that through that resonance, we would be able to hear the overtone much better than we can even through the video.
Yeah, I think so too. There are a couple of other videos, even if you guys just want to, this one isn't posted on YouTube because he literally just made it like not even 24 hours ago, but you can actually go onto YouTube and just search for overtone series. And there are probably 3 fairly good examples of that, but it just really helps to kind of start us being able to comprehend how we perceive, not only audibly, but visually, and how so much of those concepts are not only fascinating, but they can be proven and are factual. So I hope that exploration continues even more in your work, Greg.
Yeah, I love the reference, and whenever I'm listening to music, I'm thinking about how it correlates to the visual realm, and how you could transcribe that into visual terms. Unfortunately, I don't explore enough breadth of music to be able to really push that. But if I had another life, I would probably research it much more.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, while we figure this out, Greg, give us a quick primer on your naming canon. It's obviously, there's a kind of a precision there that is a nice contrast with something as fleeting as a peony petal. But is there a quick decoder that you could give us?
Yeah, I wish there were. No, titling work can be so, it can be overly directive very quickly. And so I try to offer some title that gives reference to what I'm thinking, but I don't want it to be so overbearing that it points you away from what you want to read, because these are images that ultimately I want people to appreciate on their own terms. And in this particular piece that you have the slide up for now, the ring section luminescing, I just titled this, and I can tell you that it wasn't extremely involved. I didn't think for a long time, but I did see a portion of a ring forming in the series of blossoms in this piece. And these recent pieces all do have a quality of light that I'm trying to amplify, possibly more than I have in past work. And so I'm thinking more about that aspect of the potential internal light to the overlapping of the blossoms and the event that is happening there, the experience or the energy that is being communicated or that is coming out as a result of these different blossoms coming together.
We had a great comment from Mary Claire about the alternative dimensions that are not obviously visual or present, and about the emotional content of your work. And that's something that is really, really intriguing, I think, to all of us. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, Mary Claire, I'm gonna get you for this. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is an emotional content to the work, for sure. And it goes. I keep returning to a quote of Jasper Johns that I picked up out of his what is it? His writings, sketchbook notes, and writings, notes, and interviews book that I had on. I had picked it up when I was an undergrad student because I've always been really fond of his work. But he says that. He says, I think one wants from a painting a sense of life. It has to, the final painting has to, the final statement has to be not a deliberate statement, but a helpless statement. It has to be what you can't avoid saying. And I think that this has always really stuck with me because I understood through reading a lot of his writings and analyzing his thought process, or at least trying to understand it, that struck me as extremely important in the studio. We explore, everything that we have an interest in exploring, and the objective is to follow whatever vein of interest is the richest and the most enduring. And when we have exhausted that path and there is nothing more that we feel like we can say, then the idea is that beyond that point, that's when you get to your true self. And that's when you are trying to share something. You're not trying to share anything, but you're actually sharing something that is the core of who you are. And so I identify with that a lot. I'm not claiming that I've gotten to that place in my painting. I just don't work fast enough to be able to get through all of the ideas that I have. But with so much going on in the world today, with what I read on the news, and I'm kind of a news junkie, I read it online all the time, and who hasn't in the past several years. And I'm just absorbed by all of the problems of the world and the issues that are oppressing civilization today. And yet I'm not able to respond to that in the paintings that I'm making, either because I'm too slow and too deliberate in my mental process to respond to it, or because I have to forego these things that are definitely important to the world, and allow others who are more adept at communicating those concerns and helping us to better understand them, and leave that so that I can explore this subject matter, which is essentially a respite from all of that. It's I wouldn't call it an escape, because I'm not trying to avoid the pressing concerns of today, but it really is a respite and a place where I want to spend time, where I want to live.
You mentioned Jasper Johns, and it's interesting when I was talking about my relationship with the flower petals, or by being able to feel that those are already part of my life, so I don't have to analyze them. I think that is also a concept shared by Jasper Johns, that you paint what you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
You paint what's in your everyday life. And if you do that, people don't have to jump over the hurdle of trying to figure out what the thing is that you're painting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's familiar enough that it's so non-threatening that you can actually enter that world of
Yeah.
And I think that contributes to the idea of a durational experience that you were talking about as well. It's comfortable to enter your paintings because they're inviting, they have so much depth, and your eye has so much to explore within a familiar composition, a familiar compositional element, I should say.
Yeah. I'm glad that you find that, and I hope that others find that too, and want to have that ongoing dialogue with an image, because whether it's my work or anyone's work, I think that there's definitely a richness that comes out when you spend more time with something. And the paintings that I did at the beginning of this this project of working on peonies, I have a couple hanging in our apartment, and there's one right across from the sofa. And I look at it every night. and every night I can continue to look at it, and I'm not tired of it. And periodically I'll note things that seem different about it, or I'll notice something that I hadn't noticed. I'll notice there was, something that I needed to correct, or there was something that I just wasn't sure why I did it that way. But I think that for me, that's that sort of experience and of duration and endurance is what I hope to achieve in the pictures that I make.
I'd like to open it up for anyone else who has any questions or comments about the work. Is there anybody that would like to ask Greg a question or make a comment?
I have a comment, if it's okay.
Of course.
Looking, hi Greg, looking at your work, and you talking about your fascination with nature and science, and looking for some sort of meaning. I can't help but remember I saw a film about the God particle, in which scientists were looking for. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Scientists were searching for evidence to show if the universe was based in chaos, like from the Big Bang, if everything was based in chaos, or if it was based in some sort of, if it had some sort of sense to it, if there was some sort of, and I think they found that it was equal parts organized, and it reminds me of your work. It seems like it could be chaotic, but then there's also some sort of organization to it. I think I'm hearing an echo now, so that's it. It's beautiful.
I think on a more mundane level, I've wrestled with the issue that that the work could be relegated to pattern, and that it has a tendency at moments to start to resemble pattern. And I think that that's, for me, an interesting area that I haven't quite explored, but I am interested in the idea of establishing visual fields that have a pattern-like quality and yet never repeat themselves and have no shapes or elements that are actually the same throughout. And I think that apart from occasionally using one of the blossoms in two different instances, maybe reversing it or having part of it cropped off of one edge of the canvas and then using another portion of it for another part of the canvas, I've never been able to have a matrix in these paintings that I could essentially stamp and repeat in another place. And it drives me crazy because I wanted to find a way to paint faster. And not to go into technical detail, but at one point I thought screen printing was going to be my solution, and I was going to be able to make a screen stencil for each of the different shapes that I wanted to paint. And it would just be a matter of registering that stencil in that place and then squeegeeing acrylic paint as opposed to silkscreen ink through that. But I mean, just thinking about it drives me insane. So that's really one of the aspects of the painting, of making these paintings that I do enjoy. And then conversely, to take it back to printmaking, and again, a little bit of a technical note, I'm blotting the paint off of the canvas as much as I am applying it on the canvas. And so there is an element of trace monotype to the work that harkens back to all of my printmaking background, that I should say was something that I appreciated from undergraduate school on, but then really it took off in New Mexico, and then following New Mexico when thanks to my graduate art history professor who made me fall in love with Italy. And I think she's here, but I'm not sure. She put a little note in my mailbox about a fellowship opportunity at a small private art school in Venice. And I applied to it. And the long story short is that I eventually got it and was able to go there and spend a year living in Venice making prints and thinking about that very claustrophobic environment that has a whole different quality of space. But it was a wonderful place for prints and then to carry that forward.
There, you can speak.
Yes, she is here.
Christian, are you there?
Yes.
Hi.
This is wonderful.
It's great to have you here. I'm so glad you could tune into this.
Of course. I'm in the middle of a snowstorm in Virginia.
Oh my goodness. That's great.
Looking at these beautiful works. Thank you.
I wish we were in the middle of a snowstorm too. Unfortunately, it's dark here. And I can't show you the outside. But one other thing that I wanted to mention was the quality of light here and going back to the solstice and this notion of the solstice. I did a little homework between last night and today to figure out what the altitude of the sun is at its highest point on the winter solstice here in Berlin versus in New Mexico, and also for my Columbus, Ohio attendees, reference to Columbus, Ohio. And the sun at its highest point in Santa Fe today, or tomorrow it will be, I think is 34 degrees altitude off of the horizon. In Ohio, it's 28 degrees. And here in Berlin, it will be at its highest point at 14 degrees, or roughly 14 degrees. And so it gives you an idea of how anemic the light is, and it barely clears the buildings in the city. And so the streets remain shaded, and we're not even in the Arctic Circle, and we're not even in Norway or up in Canada, or northern Canada, I should say.
That has to do with how north, right? That's where that declination comes
from. Yeah.
The southern are larger angles, the northern are smaller angles, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean your shadows are longer?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think that I don't understand this from the astronomical standpoint well enough, or I don't understand the solar system well enough, but I think that the arc of the sun, summer or winter here, is more gradual in its rise and setting than it is along the equator, let's say. If you're at the equator, the sun essentially comes up due east and goes down due west, whereas here it will come up far north of east in the summer and go down north of west in the winter. Versus, north of west set north of west in the summer, and then it's south of west in the winter and south of west in the summer. So you see a much shortened arc of the sun in that case.
I'm wondering if Joshua might have a question about your work.
Joshua, are you there? Joshua, hi. Do you want to ask a question? Which painting do you like the best? Do you like the one behind you? All of them. Very diplomatic answer.
That one.
You like the one across from the sofa? Yeah.
Should I show it?
No. No. No, you don't have to show it. But thanks.
What are we doing exactly here?
We're chatting with you.
We'll show and all our chaos too. Can you see it?
Can you see it? I see it.
Beautiful.
Greg, is that the painting you mentioned earlier? Is the one you see
That's the one that I've been studying a lot. It's about to get grazed with pollen spores from the lilies in that vase, but we'll have to get that out of there eventually.
All right, Kiko.
Mary Powell and Mary Claire and Christian, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for joining us. Oh, can I zoom into this painting behind and
Yes,
just show them the aspect of what makes this? This is a little this is a 3-panel piece that I'm going to see if I can get close enough here that you can see it. The distinction between this piece and the other pieces that I had done prior to that, apart from the glaring light, is that you've got, in this one I've done essentially a flat background where there is no overlap on those silhouetted peony forms. It's just a flat ground that is very muted and very close to the background color, which is not black. It looks kind of probably like it's just washed out, but it's actually kind of a blue-gray. And the other element here that is kind of a new exploration for me was that I was playing with diffusing light around the edges of some of these forms just to give, to try to heighten this quality of luminescence that that I wanted to bring out. So here you, Tonya.
It's
Are you
amazing.
there? You are.
We have another question.
Yes.
About orientation. Can you talk about the orientation of your works? That's a very good question.
Yes. I'm not, you know, I have a particular orientation based on my sensibility and how I want to view them, and I build them based on an understanding that the light is falling from a certain position above us, which is probably most natural, as opposed to a light coming from below, and so the orientation I tend to want to be the way I have established it to be. I create the compositions and find a visual balance and quality of movement based on how it looks right side up. I have found that people are from time to time interested in inverting them, putting them sideways, seeing what happens when they're turned in their orientation. And that's fine, just don't tell me about it.
Can I ask you a question about obsession?
Oh no. Yes, let me plug in my computer. I don't want it to die. Or actually, maybe I do. Oh, sorry. I just got cut off. All right, I gotta go. My computer's about to die.
Sorry, Greg.
About obsession. What kind of obsession, Mary Claire?
Well, about the exquisite detail that you were, we had a conversation last night, you and I, about our different ways of approaching painting. And
Yeah.
you would talk, and I was saying how I think that your exquisite detail draws people to them, to your images. They are immaculate and incredibly precise. And that is your way of working. And there is a kind of obsessiveness about it, really. I mean, I remember a very long time ago when I first met you, I blew charcoal dust all over you accidentally, and you nearly had a fit.
Can you explain that? Can you explain the setup there? That was at the
It was a
McNamara
residency. Yes, it was a residency at the McNamara Foundation, and we were put next door to each other accidentally or on purpose. I don't know. It
in
was
an
neither
open
of our
space
choice.
with little
In an
alcove.
open space. Yes, that's right. And our practice is polar opposites. But I have always really admired your extraordinary focus and amazing precision, and I just wanted you to kind of elaborate a bit, please, if you could, about your process.
I've always admired your incredible freedom and ability to let go of what is what might be a formula or habit that might begin to form in your work, because you're so capable of pulling something new out of the hat at any given moment.
Well, I would argue that you are too, because the first works that I saw that you did were of the water when you were, before you did what's that? I can't see what that is. Oh gosh, yes. That is a long time ago. The first works that I saw you did were you had done a residency before I met you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
In a lake or by a lake, hadn't you? Where you were, and so you were painting absolutely exquisite, transparent scenes of water. And I see those, the ideas and that process echoed here in the peonies and in your river paintings too. So there is this idea of transparency. Is that in any way related to an idea of there being present in the world dimensions and existences that are intangible? I mean, I've said enough. Please speak.
I think that's a lovely interpretation, and I would love it if people bring that to the table. And I'm glad that you brought up the Morris Graves Foundation, because that residency that I did that was the same summer and just prior to our meeting in Maine, when we did that residency together in Maine. But the Morris Graves Foundation was essentially the beginning to this whole modus operandi, where I was thinking about the overlapping of forms and the building of these overlapped shapes. And what you first saw at McNamara was organic shapes that were biomorphic, but not specific to some particular plant. And then I began incorporating elements of the Hudson River and working from maps with bodies of water, but in any case, always overlapping shapes, because I think that what formed out of that Morris Graves residency was the notion of generations giving birth to new generations. They were talking about Robert Yarber, the caretaker and director of the program, was always speaking of the grandfather trees. And if you go to Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, this is just everyday speech. But we think, we don't think, I would say, about trees in terms of generations of life. And back, at least from my experience in the Midwest, if you talk to an arborist, they do, but it's not such an everyday occurrence, I think, for us, because most of the forest is not coming, it's not virgin forest that has been around in the US since it was colonized. And here you've got trees that are so incredibly old, and then you've got their offspring. And so I started thinking about nature and more specifically plant matter as having this life cycle and giving birth to offspring. And the way that I could do that pictorially without working temporally, was to merge two independent forms and have them give rise to a new form. And so that, you see that obviously in the work behind me and so much of what I'm doing now. But I explored that in different ways for a long time, since 2001.
That's lovely. So you could maybe say that it was something about birth, even?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
But I don't want to get quite that literal. And I tend to, you don't see figures in my paintings. I don't tend to want to dwell too much from my own experience on the humanity aspect of it. I want us to have an experience with the image, but I don't want the images to be associative or valued only for their reference to humanity, because I think that there are so many other departments where you can concentrate on the importance of people and what we're doing and what we're thinking and how we're getting along. And this is, for me, a break from that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Greg?
I would love to ask the question, do I get to come out and have painting lessons with you when COVID's over? I would love that.
Sure. Come to Berlin and do a residency, Mary, but we're going to probably come to Colorado first.
Okay, I've got room for all three of you, so that would be wonderful.
There.
Yeah.
I see a fire behind you, and I think that's enough of a draw alone.
Oh
But
yeah,
boy,
it's
oh boy.
beautiful snow. I'm going up later to the snow, so yeah, it's beautiful.
It'll
here.
be great. It'll be great to eventually get out there and see you. I hope that we can soon.
Excellent, excellent. Well, great to listen to you talk about your art. I just love, it's like whoosh back to college and then back, like just your progression is amazing. So bravo.
It's great I'm so glad that we're able to be back in touch and to be able to share this with you. It's great that you were able to join this today.
Yes, my pleasure. It's great. So thank you.
Mom and Dad, are you, can you, yeah.
I did. I said I had a comment, not a question. And
Uh-huh.
I realized that I was muted. So now I'm unmuted. I just think in this particular time in the world, and not just in our country, but everywhere, we are all looking for something to bring peace to our existence. And what you are painting is so restful and it's so fulfilling. It's so easy to look at on an ongoing basis. It's not, some of them, but most what I'm drawn to is the beauty and the softness that brings rest to soul. Am I echoing? I feel like I'm hearing.
Yeah, it started to after a minute, and I'm not sure why, but I don't know if how we avoid that. That's a Zoom technicality that I'm not sure what to do.
Right, I apologize.
But I heard I was able to hear everything, and yeah, there is definitely a restfulness about them that I hope to.
Can I butt in? I'm
Yes.
Christiane. I just wanted to tell your audience that I wish I were at my original place of residence, because there I have some Greg Murr works from long ago, and we could compare them with his works today. And the width is there, the technique is there, but the works themselves are so different, and they show so much exciting growth and change and interest in things. And I want to thank you, Greg, very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Christian. And I have to say, because I didn't mention this earlier, it's common knowledge for me, but and some of you here, but I made reference to a graduate art history professor that pushed me to fall in love with Italy. She didn't have to push very hard, and it was Christiane Euscogier, and she was the one who introduced me to the scuola in Venice, and really the reason that I ended up spending a year there and then going back for another year in 2005. And if you want to carry fate really a step further, it was because of her and because of that relationship with the scuola that I met Daniela, and we flew back together on a flight from Venice to Berlin and sat next to one another. And so that was the end of it.
Thank you all so much for joining. And
I
Greg,
would have something to say.
What would you like to say?
Merry Christmas.
Aw.
Merry Christmas,
Thank
Joshua.
you, Joshua.
Thank you.
And
Merry Christmas, Joshua.
Merry Christmas to everyone. And we hope you'll stay in touch with us and with Greg and continue to follow his work and what incredible work he's doing. And Susie, I want to say to you, I really appreciate and agree with what you were saying, that right now, especially, we're in a time that needs to be transformed. And Greg's work, you know, I feel like it really does that. And it reinstills my faith in the transformative power of art and how much we need it in our lives right now. And just like we're about to experience the darkest day of the year, maybe the darkest moments of the year we've been going through, just like in Greg's work, where the light emerges, you know, from the expansion and contraction and the movement of the universe in his paintings. I feel like that's what we're going to be able to experience as a civilization in 2021. So it's amazing how art can not only help us find solutions in our own psyches, but it can also help us find hope and help us understand that this is a natural progression of change. And thank you all. Thanks for supporting contemporary art. Thank you for supporting Greg's work. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. If you'd like to see a recording of this video, it will be posted to our website, probably by tomorrow.
Hopefully in an edited form, right?
Yeah.
The 4-minute version.
Yes.
Highlights. Thank you all. Thank you so much thanks for attending this. This has been fun and interesting and good, really positive experience for me.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks. I'm gonna tune out and go upstairs and have dinner.
Bye, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Christian and Mary. Thank you, Monica.
Great to hear you.
Thanks, Aunt Kath and Uncle Bill.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.